My name is Chloe Vetter. On my job application, under languages, I wrote one word. English. That was a lie. I speak 9. I buried every certificate the same week I heard my fiancé of 9 years, Spencer, speaking fluent German to another woman, his new fiancé, calling me a stepping stone he was done using. For 4 years I hid in an ordinary analyst job, saying nothing, while my company begged for anyone who spoke German fluently enough to close a $250 million deal. Then, at our gala, Spencer walked in as the European partner's own representative and threatened to expose my past unless I came back to serve him again. He had no idea our CEO had already exposed his. I was 7 when my mother taught me the word for home in 4 different languages. By 26 I had 9, a master's in international relations from Georgetown, and a certainty that felt like bedrock, that Spencer Hale loved me the way he said he did, in whichever language he happened to be showing off in that week. We had been together 9 years when it ended. I want to tell you about the last night first, because everything before it was just me building a house on sand I hadn't tested yet. The event was a networking reception at the Hendricks Group, downtown, late October. Crystal glasses, a string quartet nobody was listening to. I'd gone to find Spencer a refill, and instead found him in an alcove near the coat check, speaking German to a woman in a green dress I didn't recognize. His German was passable. Hers was fluent, native fluent, the kind that comes from a childhood in Munich. I understood every word because I always did, and he had never once asked me to hide that I did.
Sie ist wie eine Leiter, he was saying.
She's like a ladder.
Man benutzt sie, höher zu kommen. Danach lässt man sie einfach stehen.
You use it to climb. Afterward, you just leave it standing there. The woman laughed, not unkindly, more like she was agreeing with a joke she'd heard before.
Und die Ringe?
She asked. And the rings?
Wenn ich mit Iberia fertig bin, Spencer said.
When I'm done with Iberia. I did not drop my glass. I want that on the record. I set it down on a passing tray, very carefully, the way you'd set down something you didn't want to explain later. Then I walked over and said in English, Sophia, right?
I'm Chloe.
Sophia Brandt's face did something complicated. Spencer's did not. That was the part that stayed with me. Not that he'd been caught, but that he simply reorganized his features into mild irritation, like I'd interrupted a call. You understood that, he said. Not a question. Every word. He didn't apologize. He didn't even really deny it. He looked at me for a long moment in the noise of that party, and he said, You were never loved, Chloe. You were managed. There's a difference, and you were too smart not to know it. I remember the string quartet was playing something by Vivaldi. I remember thinking that was almost funny. What happened over the following year, I only pieced together slowly, the way you notice a bruise is spread before you remember where you hit it. Recruiters stopped returning calls. A firm in Brussels that had all but offered me a position sent a 2-line rejection instead. A woman I'd known at a conference told me, over coffee she clearly regretted buying, that people were saying I'd fabricated language credentials to inflate my resume, that I was unreliable under pressure, that I'd been let go from a prior post for professional dishonesty. None of it was true. All of it followed me like weather. 9 months of that, and I stopped applying to anything that required a language line on the application. The night I burned the certificates, I didn't plan it as a ceremony. I was cleaning out a drawer, and there they were, Goethe Institute, DLF, the Confucius Institute certificate I'd worked 18 months for, and I thought about Spencer's mouth shaping the word lighter, ladder, and something in me just went quiet and decided. I didn't burn all of them. Paper doesn't always catch the way you want it to, and I didn't want to set off a smoke alarm at 11 at night. Mostly I tore them. I remember the sound the German one made, thick cardstock, harder to rip than I expected, so I had to use scissors on the last third. I kept exactly one language after that. The one nobody could weaponize because everyone already assumed I had it. 3 weeks later, I filled out an application for a financial analyst position at Summit Capital. There was a field near the bottom. Languages spoken. I sat with the cursor blinking there for longer than I'd like to admit. Then I typed English and hit submit before I could think better of it. I told myself no one would ever know the difference. I want you to remember that I actually believed that. What I didn't know, sitting at my kitchen table with a torn certificate still in the trash can beside me, was that the man interviewing me 2 weeks later would read that single word, English, and smile at it in a way I couldn't place at the time, like he already knew it wasn't the whole truth and had decided, for reasons of his own, to wait. The name Julian Reinhardt sat at the top of my offer letter, and 4 years later, I still worked directly beneath him. The Tuesday of that week began the way most Tuesdays did, with a 9 a.m. status meeting on the 14th floor, 12 people around a glass table, and a stack of translated documents nobody had actually translated. Marcus from Legal was reading aloud from a summary somebody in Frankfurt had prepared in English, and I sat with my laptop open, my coffee going cold, watching the German original scroll past on the shared screen behind him. The English summary said the earnout clause triggered at 18 months. The German said 24 Monate. 24. I didn't say anything. I wrote it on a sticky note, folded it once, and slid it toward Peyton, who sat to my left in a navy blazer with her reading glasses pushed up into her hair. She glanced down, frowned, then looked at me sideways for exactly 1 second too long. Marcus, she said, can we get someone to double-check the earnout timeline against the original German? Something feels off. I can send it back to the translation vendor, Marcus said. Take a few days. We don't have a few days, Julian said. He was standing near the window, arms crossed, watching the room the way he always did, like a man counting cards nobody else knew he was counting. Project Iberia closes its exclusivity window in 6 weeks. If we're paying for a $250 million mistake because a contractor in Munich fat-fingered a translation, I want to know today. The room went quiet in that specific way rooms go quiet when nobody wants to be the one who doesn't have the answer. I could take a look, I said. I did some German in undergrad. Might just be able to spot the obvious stuff. It was the same sentence I'd used a dozen times over 4 years, small enough to be forgettable, vague enough to be safe. I'd practiced it the way other people practice saying no to a second drink. Julian's eyes moved to me and stayed there a half-second longer than they needed to.
Take a look, he said. I did.
That night, I spread the document across my kitchen table, under the same light where I'd once burned 3 certificates and torn 6 more into a trash can. I read every clause twice. The earnout was 24 months, not 18. There is also a currency conversion error buried in Section 4.2. The vendor had converted at a stale exchange rate, understating the German partner's exposure by roughly $19,000. Small in the context of $250 million. Not small if it got signed. I opened my email and typed, then deleted, then typed again. Fixed timeline confirmed at 24 months per original. Flagged a conversion discrepancy in 4.2, recommend legal re-verify. Educated guess based on undergrad coursework might be worth a professional translator's second opinion too. I read the last sentence back before I hit send. Educated guess. I had built an entire career on that phrase. Peyton wrote back within 4 minutes, which meant she hadn't been asleep either. Good catch. Julian's going to want to know how you spotted a currency conversion error from undergrad coursework. I didn't answer that one. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a long moment, listening to the refrigerator hum, thinking about how easy it would be to just tell her. How impossible. Thursday, Julian stopped by my desk on his way to the elevator, which he never did. He communicated by meeting invite and the occasional forwarded email, not foot traffic. He set a hand on the back of my empty guest chair and didn't sit in it. Good work on Iberia, he said. Peyton tells me you caught something the vendor missed. Got lucky, I said. He looked at me the way he had in the interview 4 years ago, unhurried, like he was reading something behind my face rather than in front of it. We're going to need someone who can sit in a room in Frankfurt in 6 weeks and not need a translator standing behind them. He said it lightly like weather. 65% increase on base, plus equity, for whoever leads that side of the deal. Be a shame if the person best suited for it decided it wasn't her problem. I wouldn't know who that'd be, I said. No, Julian said. I don't imagine you would. He walked to the elevator without waiting for an answer, which was somehow worse than if he'd pushed. At 6 that evening, the floor had mostly emptied out. Peyton knocked twice on my open door before she came in, holding a manila folder thick with paper, a German customs seal faintly visible on the corner sheet through the gap. "Iberia due diligence," she said, setting it on my desk without ceremony. Nobody's had time to get through it, and the exclusivity clock's running. It's dense. Untranslated. "I'll flag it for the vendor first thing tomorrow," I said. She didn't move toward the door. She stood there a second, one hand resting on the folder, like she wasn't quite ready to let it go.
"You could," she said.
"Or you could just read it tonight." Her voice was quiet, careful, the voice of someone choosing not to ask the question she actually wanted to ask. She looked at me the way she had over the sticky note on Tuesday, not accusing, just certain, like she'd already decided what she believed and was only waiting for me to catch up. "I trust you'll know what to do with it," she said, and left before I could tell her I didn't. The stack of folders on my desk had grown by another 2 inches overnight. I picked up the partner directory Peyton had left, the one with the exclusivity window stamped across the front in red, 6 weeks, starting today, and began cross-checking names against the seating chart for the gala. I got through the Frankfurt legal team's list before my hand stopped moving.
Spencer Hale.
Senior Counsel, European Partnerships. I read it again, waiting for it to resolve into some other name I'd misread in the fluorescent light. It didn't. Beneath his name, in the same block of text, sat Sophia Brandt, Legal, Regulatory Compliance. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. I drank it anyway because my hands needed something to do that wasn't shaking. I told myself there were 100 Spencer Hales. Then I clicked into his bio, and there was his photo, for years older, same jaw, same watch he used to wear to impress people who cared about watches. Below it, formerly of Hendricks Group, downtown Frankfurt office. I closed the laptop, opened it again,
Closed it.
Daniel knocked on the frame of my open door, holding 2 cups. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Bad coffee," I said, and took the cup he offered instead. At 11, I asked for 5 minutes with Peyton. She waved me into her office without looking up from her screen, and I stood there rehearsing the sentence I'd built in the elevator. I'd like to be reassigned from the Iberia analytics team, until it sounded thin even to me. "I think someone else should run point on the partner side reconciliation," I said instead. Peyton finally looked up. "Why?" I hadn't prepared for why. "Bandwidth," I said. "The Hendricks portfolio work is heavier than I expected." She studied me the way she had over the sticky note weeks ago, that same patient certainty, like she was reading a page in a language I hadn't admitted I could speak. "You've been asking for more responsibility since February, Chloe. Now you want less, 3 weeks before the biggest close this company's had in a decade." She wasn't angry, just waiting. "It's not that simple," I said, which was true and told her nothing. "Then uncomplicate it for me." I couldn't. I stood there with the real reason sitting behind my teeth like a stone and said, "Never mind. I'll manage the bandwidth." She let me go, but I felt her watching my back all the way to the door, and I knew, the way you know weather is turning before the sky changes, that she wasn't done asking. That afternoon I made myself useful the only way I knew how to survive being useful. I buried myself in the reconciliation sheets, because numbers didn't ask why. 3 line items into the Hendricks fee schedule, something snagged. "Daniel, pull up Ederlein Beratung for me," I said, sliding my screen toward the edge of my desk, so he could see. "Tell me what you make of this." He leaned in, scrolled, frowned. "Advisory services, market entry. 41,000 euros a quarter."
He scrolled again.
"No deliverables field. No named contact." He looked up at me. "That's not a red flag, Chloe. That's a red banner. Pull the prior 4 quarters."
He did.
Same amount. Same blank field. Routed, when I traced it, through an account in Liechtenstein before it ever touched Hendricks' books. "You want me to flag this to Peyton?" Daniel asked. I closed the spreadsheet before he finished the sentence. "Not yet. Not until I understand what I'm looking at." I opened a blank note file instead of the shared drive and typed, "Ederlein Beratung, recurring, no deliverables, LI routing, ask nobody yet." I saved it somewhere Peyton's audit trail wouldn't touch. Daniel didn't argue. He just watched me the way he did everything, quietly, like he was taking notes for later. "Not my problem," I told myself, Packing my bag at 6:38. Not my department. 6 weeks until close, and I had a reconciliation to finish and a name on a partner list I was trying very hard not to think about. I was locking my laptop when my personal phone buzzed on the desk. Not my work line. The number I'd had for barely a year, given to exactly 9 people, changed on purpose so no one from my old life could reach me, none of whom typed like this. I know you're at Summit, Chloe. We need to talk before the gala. I stood very still, the message glowing up at me in the dark office, and did not, for a long moment, breathe out. I did not breathe out. Then I put the phone face down on my desk, closed the finance tab I hadn't actually been reading for the last 10 minutes, and walked to the break room because staying still with that message glowing in my pocket felt like standing too close to a fire. Peyton was already there, pouring coffee into a mug that said "World's Okayest Boss," a joke gift from someone in legal. She looked up and didn't say hello. "Sit down," she said. "I want to talk to you about something, and I want you to let me finish before you do the thing where you make your face very smooth and say nothing." "I don't have a thing." "You have a thing." She slid a second mug toward me, already filled, already the way I took it. Too much cream, no sugar. She'd noticed that at some point without my telling her.
For years, Chloe.
"I've watched you in 100 meetings. Tuesday, the meeting." Marcus read that clause about the earnout timeline, and your lips moved. Not much. A word behind him, like you were reading ahead. My stomach dropped an inch, the kind of small internal fall you get missing a stair in the dark. I was probably just. You weren't humming along to nothing. Peyton wasn't smiling, but there was no cruelty in it either, just a flat patience, the look of someone laying a card on a table and waiting to see if I'd match it. "I'm not going to ask you what you know. I'm telling you I already suspect it's more than English, and I want you to hear what I'm about to say before you decide whether that's dangerous information in my hands." I wrapped both hands around the mug. The ceramic was too hot, and I held it anyway. 11 years ago, she said, I worked under a managing director at a firm you've never heard of because I made sure it disappeared off my resume. I spoke fluent Mandarin. He found out during a client dinner when I fixed the interpreter's mistake without meaning to. After that, I was the Mandarin girl. Every trip to Shanghai, every call at 11 at night, every deal where he needed something translated fast and didn't want to pay for it separately because why would he when he already had me? She turned her mug a quarter turn on the counter, a small, precise motion. I got a title bump. Once. In 4 years. He got 2 promotions off work I did in a language he still, to this day, cannot order dinner in. I said nothing. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall a phone rang twice and stopped. So when I say I understand why a person might decide not to tell anyone what they can do, Peyton went on, I'm not being kind. I'm being specific. I know exactly what it costs to be useful in a way people can put a price on, and then never pay. Then why are you telling me this? I said, quieter than I meant to. Because I need you to know I'm not going to make you say a word you don't want to say. I'm also going to ask you to be careful about something else entirely, and it has nothing to do with languages. She lowered her voice, even though the break room was empty.
Si pensa hale.
The name came across my desk twice this month. 2 separate complaints, informal, off the record from junior staff on the European side. Nothing HR can act on yet. Comments, the kind that don't leave marks anyone can point to. But I don't like the pattern. I don't like how confident he is that no one's watching. The mug had gone from too hot to just warm in my hands. I thought of the message still sitting on my phone in my other pocket. We need to talk before the gala. I did not tell her about it. Some doors I wasn't ready to open even for an ally. I'm not asking you to investigate anything, Peyton said. I'm asking you to keep your eyes open. And I'm giving you something, not because I want a favor back, but because I think you'll actually read it properly and most people around here skim. She reached into the folder under her arm and set it on the counter between us. Thick, cream-colored, a Summit letterhead cover sheet stamped confidential. European Partner Financials. Vendor and consultant disclosures for the Iberia deal. Every third-party contract over 10,000 euros. I want a second set of eyes that isn't already tired of looking at this deal. You have good instincts for numbers that don't add up. You could give this to Daniel. Daniel would find the math error. You'd find the lie underneath it. She pushed the folder another inch closer. That's not a compliment. It's an observation. I carried the folder back to my desk instead of opening it there, some instinct telling me I wanted walls around me for this, not the open kitchen with its hum and its ringing phones. I sat, unclipped the binder rings, and started paging through consultant agreements one at a time. Names I recognized, names I didn't, retainer amounts, wired details, signature blocks with company seals from Vaduz and Zug, and one from a shell registered in Frankfurt I'd flagged weeks earlier, without telling anyone why it bothered me. Page 14. A consulting agreement between Summit's European partner entity and a firm called Etterlein Beratung GmbH, 41,000 euros a quarter, for consecutive quarters. No deliverables listed anywhere in the file. And under the company name, in the signature block, a scrawled authorization I had seen 1,000 times before, on birthday cards, on the lease we'd once split, on the bottom of a napkin at a restaurant in Lisbon where he'd written our table number so the waiter would find us. Spencer's handwriting. I stood near the back of the ballroom at the Whitmore Hotel, close enough to the stage to see Julian's notes, but far enough to disappear if I needed to. 320 guests filled the room, chandeliers throwing soft gold light over ivory linen, and a string quartet worked through something classical and forgettable. The air smelled of warm champagne and candle wax. Peyton found me there, a glass of sparkling water in each hand. She passed me one without asking. "You look like you're about to sit an exam," she said. "I hate these things. Everyone hates these things. That's why we drink at them." She clinked her glass against mine and turned toward the stage, where Julian was climbing the 2 shallow steps, adjusting his jacket, tapping the microphone once out of old habit. He began in English, thanked the board, thanked the Frankfurt office, thanked by name 6 people on the Iberia deal team. Not me. I let my shoulders drop half an inch. Then he said, and, to conclude, and something in his posture changed, a straightening, almost formal, like a man setting down one instrument to pick up another. Und jetzt, für unsere Partner aus Frankfurt, Hey Said, möchte ich etwas auf Deutsch hinzufügen. And now, for our partners from Frankfurt, I'd like to add something in German. The room did what rooms do when they don't understand a language. It applauded anyway, a polite ripple of hands that meant nothing. I did not applaud. I stood very still, my water glass sweating against my palm, and listened to Julian Reinhardt speak German the way I hadn't heard anyone speak it aloud, to me, in 4 years. He talked about the 11-month diligence process, about a deal that would double Summit's European footprint. And then he said the sentence I would replay for the rest of my life. Für die Person, die dieses Geschäft zu Ende führen wird, 65% mehr Gehalt und einen Anteil am Unternehmen. For the person who will see this deal through to the end, 65% more salary, and a share of the company. He wasn't looking at his notes when he said it. He was looking out into the room, past the German-speaking clients he was ostensibly addressing, and his eyes found mine and held there for 1 full second before he glanced away and switched back to English to close the toast. My heart was doing something embarrassing. Peyton smiled blandly at the stage, understanding nothing. I understood every word, and that was the problem. The words had landed exactly where he meant them to. The applause came again, warmer this time, glasses raised. I raised mine too, a half-second late, my mind still translating and retranslating that one sentence to make sure I hadn't invented it. I hadn't. Julian came down off the stage 20 minutes later, shaking hands, laughing at something a board member said, moving through the crowd like a man with nowhere urgent to be. He reached me last. He didn't shake my hand. He leaned in, close enough that I caught the cedar of his cologne under the candle smoke, and said quietly, in German, so quietly that Peyton 3 feet away caught none of it.
Ich habe es seit Ihrem Vorstellungsgespräch gewusst.
Ich habe nie gedrängt, weil ich wusste, dass Sie den richtigen Moment selbst wählen würden. I've known since your interview. I never pushed, because I knew you would choose the right moment yourself. He straightened up, patted my shoulder once like we'd been discussing the weather, and said in English, "Get some rest, Chloe. Big month ahead." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "And Chloe, Once Iberia closes, there are some numbers in the file I'd like a second set of eyes on. Quietly. Just between us. He didn't wait for me to ask what he meant. He walked off toward the bar, leaving me standing there with my pulse in my throat and 4 years of careful silence cracking down the middle like ice giving way under weight. He had known. Since the interview. Every dinner where I'd bitten my tongue through a mistranslated menu, every meeting where I'd let a German document sail past uncorrected, every lie I'd told with a straight face, he had known, and he had waited, and he had never once made me answer for it. I didn't know whether that was mercy or a longer, more patient kind of leverage, and the not knowing sat in my chest like something swallowed wrong. And now there were numbers he wanted checked, quietly, just between us, as if something about Iberia didn't sit right with him either. I turned to find Peyton, to say something, anything, to keep my hands busy with normal conversation. When I turned back, Spencer was already there, standing directly behind me, close enough that I hadn't heard him arrive over the quartet and the chatter. He held a glass of red wine loose in one hand, and he was smiling. That same easy smile I used to think meant something. "Hello, girl who only knows English," he said. "We have a lot to talk about." I stepped back from him without answering. "There's champagne on your collar," I said, and walked toward the terrace doors instead of the bar. He followed. Of course he followed. The terrace was cooler, string lights strung along the railing, the sound of the party dropping to a hum behind glass. Below us, the city ran gold and gray toward the river. I put my hands on the stone rail and did not turn around when I heard the door click shut behind him. "You've gotten good at this," Spencer said. The stone face. "I don't remember you having that." "You don't remember a lot of things correctly. I remember you crying in the parking lot of Hendrik's group for 40 minutes. I remember because I checked my watch." I turned then. Up close, for years had sharpened him. Better suit, a thinner face, a wedding band that wasn't Sophia's ring finger yet, but sat close to it, like a rehearsal. "What do you want, Spencer?" "A conversation. Between old friends who understand each other." He leaned against the rail, easy, like this was a negotiation he'd already won. "I know what you did in there tonight. The earn-out clause. The currency error. Nobody guesses 400 basis points, Chloe. You read German like it's your first language because it basically is." I said nothing. My pulse was doing something I didn't let show on my face. "Here's what happens now," he went on. "You send me the Iberia file before Friday's exclusivity deadline. Just the valuation section. And in exchange, I don't mention to 320 people in that room that Summit Capital's rising star lied on her employment application 4 years ago. A fraud, technically. HR would have to act on that. Julian would have to act on that. You'd blow up your own deal to punish me. I'd survive it. Would you?" I reached into my clutch as if for a mint and thumbed my phone's voice memo open instead, screen dark against the fabric. My thumb found the record icon by feel. I'd practiced it in a bathroom stall 20 minutes earlier, some instinct in me already 3 steps ahead of the rest of me. "Say that again," I said. Slower. "So, I understand exactly what you're threatening." He almost smiled. "You think I didn't expect that?" He held up his own phone screen toward me, a red recording icon of his own already running, timestamp climbing. "I called it before you walked out here. Sophia's inside right now telling a man named Marcus from Kessler Group that you cornered me at the gala asking for cash to keep quiet about our history. I told her you'd been unstable since we broke up. She's very convincing when she's frightened, and right now she's frightened of me. Not for me. That works out well." The floor didn't move, but something under my ribs did. Nobody will believe that. They don't need to believe it. They need to wonder. He pushed off the rail, straightened his jacket, and reached past me to open the terrace door himself, gentlemanly mocking. "Enjoy the rest of the evening, girl who only knows English." I stayed on the terrace a moment longer than I should have, the cold coming through the thin silk at my shoulders. In the corridor outside the ladies' room, I played the recording back with my palm cupped around the phone. Wind noise. The clink of his ring against the rail. 3 garbled seconds of his voice, swallowed by a passing waiter's tray. Evidence of nothing. I had gone in armed and come out with static. Near the gold-flocked wallpaper by the mirrors, two women I didn't recognize were already trading a version of the story, heads bent close. One of them glanced at me over her champagne glass, then quickly away. I understood, standing there. That silence had never been protecting me. It had been protecting him, buying him 4 extra years to build whatever this was undisturbed while I stayed small on purpose, so no one would ever again have a reason to use me. A hand closed around my wrist before I reached the mirrors. Sophia. Her grip was too tight, mascara starting to run at the inner corner of one eye. She pulled me sideways into the empty end of the ladies' lounge, past the attendant, into the farthest stalls antechamber, and let go only once we were alone. "You think you are the only one he used," she said, in German, barely above a whisper, her voice shaking in a way I had never heard from her 4 years ago, when she'd stood beside him laughing at me in this exact language. "I have something you need to see." The bathroom door didn't lock. Sophia braced it shut with her hip anyway, phone already in her hand, thumb moving fast. "There's no time," she said, still in German, her mascara starting to run at the corners. "So look, just look." She turned the screen toward me. An email thread, subject line in German. Ederlein Beratung, quarterly confirmation. Sender address I didn't recognize.
Recipient, Spencer Hale.
Ederlein doesn't exist, Sophia said. "I mean it exists on paper. A registered address in Vaduz. No employees. No office. I checked myself 6 weeks ago because the invoices kept crossing my desk for signature and something felt." She stopped, swallowed.
Wrong.
41,000 euros every quarter for valuation consulting on a deal Ederlein was never staffed on. I took the phone from her hands because mine had started to shake and I needed something to hold. I scrolled.
For invoices.
For quarters. The signature at the bottom of each one. I knew it before I saw the name. I'd been staring at that exact loop of the S, that impatient slash through the H, since I was 25 years old. "He signed his own name on the shell company's letterhead," I said. "He didn't even bother hiding it from you. He didn't think he needed to." Sophia's voice cracked. "I was supposed to be, after Iberia closes, we were going to Zurich. He told me 2 months ago." She laughed, short and ugly. "Then last week he brought in someone new for legal continuity. A woman from Geneva. I found out because I saw the hotel booking. 1 room. I didn't say anything." I was reading the second email now. Further down the thread, one Sophia had forwarded to herself from an account that wasn't Spencer's, a competitor's domain. Vantage Merchant Partners. Summit's closest rival on 3 deals in the last 2 years.
Keep scrolling, Sophia said.
The screenshot after that. A message thread in a different app, half in English, half in German, timestamped 9 days earlier. Spencer, writing to someone saved only as V. Frankfurt. Valuation model attached. Full earnout structure. Both drafts. This buys you 3 weeks before Summit files. Attached, a file name I recognized. The same valuation model Peyton had handed me in a folder with an unsigned cover sheet. He hadn't just skimmed money off a fake consulting contract. He'd handed Summit's own numbers to Vantage before Summit had even filed exclusivity. The bathroom door shoved open behind us. No knock, no warning, and Daniel Okafor nearly fell into the room, tie loosened, hair damp at the temples like he'd run the length of the ballroom floor. "There you are," he said, then clocked Sophia and went stiff. "Sorry, Chloe, I need 30 seconds. Sophia stepped back against the sink, wiping under her eyes with the side of her hand, saying nothing, watching him with the wariness of someone who no longer knew who was safe to be seen with. Daniel held up his phone. His hand wasn't steady either. I went out to the east hallway to take a call from my sister, and Spencer was already out there, back to me, and he didn't hear me come out. He was on the phone. I only caught the end of it, but I got some of it recording. I don't even know why I hit record. Something in his voice. He played it. 11 seconds. Spencer's voice, low, clipped in English this time. "Confirm the wire tonight. Before the toast, not after. If Reinhardt announces before the transfer clears, we lose the window." Then nothing. Footsteps. The video ended on a blur of marble floor as Daniel had pocketed the phone. Confirm the wire, I repeated. Before the toast.
Whose wire? Daniel said.
Whose window? I don't know what it means. I just knew you'd want to know it existed. I looked at the three things in my hands, Sophia's phone, the Shell company's signature, the Vantage message, and now Daniel's 11 seconds of audio, and they weren't three things anymore. They were one shape. A man who'd built a company out of a Liechtenstein address, signed his own forged consulting fees, and was, tonight, in this building, moving money before Julian could finish a sentence. We go to Julian, I said.
Now.
Both of you with me. Peyton's office was on 14, but Julian never used it during galas. He kept a smaller room off the ballroom's private corridor, the one with the good coffee machine no one else was allowed to touch. He was in it, alone, jacket off, standing at the window with his phone to his ear when we came in, and he ended the call the second he saw our faces. Sit, he said, though there weren't enough chairs and none of us sat. I gave him the phone, the signature, Daniel's recording, Sophia's shaking account of Zurich and Geneva, and one hotel room. Julian listened without once interrupting, and when I finished he walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and set down a folder so thick the rubber band around it had left a groove in the cover. It was already labeled. Hail S. Confidential. 11 months, Julian said quietly, looking at the three of us like he was deciding how much of his own patience to admit to. I've had people on this since February. I stared at the folder, at the date stamped on the first visible page, 9 months before I'd ever pulled a single euro figure into question. Julian closed the folder, squared its edges against the desk, and checked his watch. In 20 minutes, he's going to walk onto that stage to destroy you, he said. Let him. Then I'll speak. Spencer's hand closed around the microphone before Julian had even reached the podium. Actually, he said, smiling at the audio tech, give me 30 seconds first. The tech looked to Julian. Julian looked at Spencer, then briefly at me. He gave the smallest nod, not permission, patience, and stepped back half a pace. Let him. Julian had said to me minutes ago. I stood at the edge of the dance floor with a glass of water I hadn't touched, and I watched Spencer turn to face 320 people the way he used to face a room he owned. I want to say something about integrity, Spencer began, because I think this company deserves to know who it's rewarding. The band had stopped. Somewhere behind me, a chair leg scraped against the ballroom floor as someone turned to watch. I felt Peyton shift closer, her shoulder almost touching mine, and out of the corner of my eye I saw Daniel Okafor go very still near the bar, his phone already half raised out of habit. 4 years ago, Spencer said, a woman walked into this firm and told you she spoke one language. English. That's what's on her file. That's what she told HR, what she told her manager, what she's told everyone in this room who's ever asked her to translate a term sheet. He found me in the crowd. Isn't that right, Chloe? I didn't answer. My hand, around the water glass, had gone very still, the kind of stillness that takes effort. She has a master's in international relations, Spencer went on, raising his voice just enough. She speaks 9 languages. She's been sitting in your meetings for 4 years pretending she can't read the documents in front of her. Lying. To her employer. To the people about to hand her a 65% raise and equity in a $250 million deal. A ripple moved through the crowd. Not gasps, something quieter and worse. Murmurs. Someone near the bar laughed, a short, surprised sound. Quickly swallowed. Why would someone do that? Spencer asked, and now he was performing, walking a slow half-circle with a mic like he'd rehearsed the blocking. I'll tell you why. Because it's easier to fake confidence than to earn it. Because if you're the girl who only speaks English, no one expects much. No one checks your work too closely. He paused, letting the line land, and somewhere near the front I saw Sophia Brandt lower her champagne glass without drinking from it, her eyes fixed not on me but on him. I know her better than anyone in this room. 9 years, actually. And I can tell you, Chloe Vetter has always been very good at telling people exactly what they want to hear. My jaw tightened. I felt Peyton's hand find my elbow, a small steady pressure, not pulling me anywhere, just there. Beside her, Daniel had stopped pretending to hold his phone low. His thumb hovered over the screen, and I wondered, distantly, what he thought he needed to catch. "I'm not finished," Spencer said, though no one had spoken. There were rumors, a few years back, about her conduct at her last firm. Things that got buried. I wonder if HR ever asked. He let that sit in the room like a stain spreading on white linen. I watched two board members exchange a glance. A woman I didn't know cover her mouth with her hand. I did not cry. I want to be precise about that, because I'd promised myself years ago that I would never again let a room watch me fall apart over something Spencer Hale said. My hands shook. I could feel it in my fingers wrapped around the glass, but my face stayed still, the way I'd trained it to stay still through 4 years of biting down on translations I wasn't supposed to know. "Nothing to say, Chloe?" Spencer asked, almost gently, and that gentleness was worse than the accusations. "That's all right. You don't have to. Julian will say it for you." Spencer turned, at last, to Julian and held the microphone out like an offering. "Julian," he said, warm now, generous, the voice of a man doing everyone a favor. "You're about to hand this woman a promotion and a fortune. I think Summit's investors deserve to hear you confirm, on record, that this company has been deceived, that you are about to reward a liar." The room went silent in the particular way 320 people go silent when they sense something is about to happen and none of them know what. Julian didn't move for a moment. He straightened his cuff. Then he walked to the podium, took the microphone from Spencer's outstretched hand, and turned to face the crowd with the calm, unhurried expression of a man who has been waiting a very long time for exactly this moment. I had seen that look on him once before, weeks earlier, over a set of Frankfurt documents he'd asked me to check twice without telling me why.
I had not understood it then.
I understood it now. Julian tapped the microphone once, an old habit, and let the small electronic pop settle the last murmurs into stillness. "Thank you, Mr. Hale," he said, "for bringing all of this into the light." He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Now let me add a few pages you left out." Julian did not raise his voice. He clicked once. The screen behind him changed. Where his slide had shown a bar graph of quarterly projections, there was now a bank statement, blown up so large that the numbers filled the wall.
Edellein Beratung GmbH.
For line items, 41,000 euros, 4 times over, wired from a Summit Capital subsidiary account to a company that, according to the Liechtenstein registry pulled up beside it, had no employees, no office, and no product ever delivered. Edellein Beratung, Julian said, builds Summit for strategic consulting on Project Iberia. I'd like someone to tell me what that consulting was. He looked out at the room. Nobody moved. No one can, because there wasn't any. There was only a signature. The next slide was the contract page. My stomach dropped before my mind caught up. I recognized the slant of the letters before I understood why. Peyton's folder. The one she'd handed me over coffee. The same signature, magnified now to the height of a man, sat under the company's registration. "That signature belongs to Spencer Hale," Julian said. The room made a sound I'd never heard a room make. 320 people inhaling at once. Spencer's face didn't crack right away. He laughed, a short, disbelieving bark, the kind meant to make everyone else laugh with him. Nobody did. "That's a formatting error," he said. "Ask your compliance team. Half these vendor contracts get auto-signed through a template." "There's no template that forges a counter-signature for separate times," Julian said and clicked again. Now the valuation documents appeared, the German-language earn-out pages I knew by heart because I'd corrected them myself, twice, and lied about how. Julian didn't translate them for the room this time. He didn't need to. He simply highlighted, in red, the clause that read 24 months in the original filing and 18 months in the version submitted to Frankfurt. The change benefited exactly one party, he said. The buyer's representative, Mr. Hale. I heard Sophia's chair scrape against the marble before I saw her stand. She didn't look at Spencer. She looked at the room, one hand flat against her stomach like she was holding something in. "I can confirm the signature," she said, in English, her voice thin but steady. "I've seen it on our firm's documents for 3 years. And I have the emails." He asked me to route the wire through my desk, so it wouldn't show his name twice on the same file. Sophia. Spencer said her name like a warning. She didn't look at him. That was the detail I'd remember later. Not her words, but that she wouldn't turn her head. Julian clicked again. A wire transfer log filled the screen, dollar amounts running down the left side, and beside them, a name I hadn't heard until Ederline, Vantage Merchant Partners. Summit's rival bidder on Iberia. 6 weeks ago, Julian said, our internal valuation model, the one used to set our final offer price, appeared, nearly line for line, inside a Vantage pitch deck. I'd like to know how a competitor obtained proprietary numbers that existed on exactly 4 hard drives in this company. He didn't click to the video yet. He let the silence sit first, and in that silence I understood he was choosing the order on purpose, the way he'd chosen his German at the podium, each reveal time to land before the next one buried it. That's insane, Spencer said, louder now, stepping forward toward the stage like proximity might change what was on the screen. If you want to talk about who's been lying in this building, ask her.
He pointed at me.
320 faces turned. Ask the woman who had a master's degree and 9 languages for 4 years. Ask what else she's hidden. I will, Julian said. Right after this. He clicked. Daniel's video filled the screen, 11 seconds, shaky, shot from a hallway angle low near a planter. Spencer's voice, unmistakable, tight with urgency. Confirm the wire tonight. Before the toast, not after. If Reinhardt announces before the transfer clears, we lose the window. The clip ended on a freeze frame of Spencer's own face, phone pressed to his ear, taken 40 minutes before he'd walked onto the stage. The gasp this time had a different shape. It had an edge in it. Fabricated, Spencer said, but the word came out smaller. Deepfake. Anyone can. You can build that with an app now. The metadata's timestamped to this building's Wi-Fi, Julian said. Security can confirm it in 90 seconds if anyone wants to wait. Nobody wanted to wait. I watched something happen in Spencer's face I'd only seen once before, for years ago, on a different night. The moment the story he was telling stopped being believed by the person telling it. His eyes went to the ballroom doors. 2 men in plain suits were already walking through them. They didn't run. That was almost the worst part, how unhurried it was, how procedural, like this happened at galas all the time. One of them said something low to Julian, who nodded once. The other reached Spencer at the edge of the stage. Spencer Hale, the man said, and the room heard every syllable of it. We need you to come with us. Corporate espionage and securities fraud, pending formal charges. You have no idea what you're doing, Spencer said, but he wasn't looking at the officer. He was looking at me, and there was nothing left in his face but the old contempt, stripped down to its floor. As they turned him toward the doors, he twisted back, one last time. You're still just the girl who only speaks English, he said. I let him get all the way to the doors before I moved. Then I walked up the 3 steps to the stage, past Julian, who held the microphone out to me without a word, and I took it. I opened my mouth, and what came out was not English. German first. The word, verwendet, used, sat in the air the way it had sat in his mouth 4 years earlier, and this time I was the one saying it. You used me, I said, still in German, the way you told Sophia you would. A ladder. That was the word.
Eine Leiter.
I let it hold for a second, then translated it myself, flat, so no one in the room could pretend they hadn't understood. A ladder. That's what he called me. In this language. For years ago. A woman near the front pressed a hand to her mouth. 2 security officers still had Spencer by the arms near the side exit, and he'd stopped struggling, but he hadn't stopped looking at me. I switched to French.
Tu m'as dit que je n'avais jamais été aimé.
You told me I had never been loved. I said it the way he'd said it to me, cold, offhand, like weather. Then I let my own voice come back into it. You were wrong about that too. Mandarin next, for words, sharp as a slap, a line from the last fight we'd had, the one where he told me my degree was a hobby. Then Portuguese, the sentence Sophia had once repeated back to me at a dinner party, laughing, not knowing I understood every syllable. then Arabic, then Russian. Each one landed and I watched it land. On Peyton's face, tight with something that wasn't quite crying. On Daniel's, wide open. On 320 strangers who had spent 4 years believing I said, sorry, English only because it was true. I hadn't planned 9. I only realized I'd used all 9 when I ran out of insults and had one language left over, and it was English, and I used it last. I speak 9 languages, I said. I have for a long time. I stopped using most of them because a man I loved for 9 years taught me that talent is something people take from you if you let them see it. So I hid it. For 4 years, in this building, I answered emails in 1 language and thought in 5, and I told myself that was safety. I looked at Julian, not at Spencer. It wasn't safety. It was just a longer version of hiding. Julian didn't smile, exactly. He adjusted his cuff, the same small gesture from the stage 20 minutes earlier, and stepped forward with the second microphone still in his hand. Chloe Vetter has led the technical review of Project Iberia's due diligence for 6 weeks without title or credit, he said, his voice carrying to the back tables without effort. She caught a 24-month earn-out clause that had been altered to 18. She caught a currency conversion error worth $19,000 before it left this building. She did both of those things while telling this company she only spoke English. He paused. As of tonight, she doesn't have to keep telling us that. He turned fully to the room. Effective immediately, Chloe Vetter is Summit Capital's Director of International Operations. 65% salary increase. Equity, as promised at the podium an hour ago. A short breath. She leads Iberia. Not assists. Leads. The applause started at table 6, Peyton's table, before Julian had finished the sentence, and it didn't stay there. It moved outward the way water moves when something breaks the surface of it, table by table, until people were standing, and the sound of 320 people on their feet was not the sound I had expected grief and vindication to make. It was louder and stupider and better. I leaned toward Julian while the room was still loud enough to cover it. You knew, I said, about the languages. Before tonight. I've known since your second interview, he said. You corrected my translator's German without realizing you'd done it. I decided it wasn't my secret to spend. He looked at me the way he had that first day, patient, unhurried. I was waiting for you to spend it yourself. That took longer than I expected. Daniel reached me first, grinning in a way that made him look about 19 instead of 29. I got the audio, he said, like that was the only sentence he had left. The 11 seconds. It's on 3 different devices now, I made sure. 3, I said. 4, actually. I didn't want to say 4. It sounded paranoid. He laughed, too loud, adrenaline still running through it. I've been carrying that recording around for 2 days like it was a bomb. I kept checking my phone was in my pocket. I checked it in the bathroom before the toast. Peyton didn't say anything. She just put her hand flat against my back between my shoulder blades, the way you'd check that someone was still breathing, and left it there. Behind us, the officers were walking Spencer toward the ballroom's side doors. He twisted his shoulder against the grip of the taller one and got one sentence out before they had him fully through. You'll need me for the Frankfurt file, he called, and there was still, even now, some threadbare confidence left in his voice, as though the words could still be a rope thrown to pull me back. You don't know Klaus's side of it. Ederlein, I said, not loudly, but clearly enough that it reached him before the door did. 4 quarters, 41,000 euros each. I know Klaus's side of it better than you think. His face changed just slightly, and then the door took him. I set the microphone down on the small table beside the podium, and my hands, for the first time since Spencer had said the word ladder to me in German, were steady. It felt, for about 90 seconds, like the end of something. Then Sophia was in front of me, still in her navy dress, mascara smudged into one soft gray line under her left eye, and she wasn't looking at the door where they'd taken Spencer. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't place, not triumph, not shame, something narrower than both. Can I ask you something, she said in English, before I go talk to the police? I nodded, because I didn't trust my voice not to sound like I was bracing for another blow. How long? Sophia asked, Did you know it was me who was supposed to marry him, before that night 4 years ago? No, I said. Not until that night. But I understood it fast. Sophia's mouth moved like she wanted to argue with the timeline. Then she let it go. We stood in that ballroom bathroom for another few seconds, two women who had both loved the same liar, and neither of us reached for the other. That was fine. Some things don't need to become friendship to become finished. 3 weeks later, I was standing in a different room on the 14th floor, and someone was drilling a hole in my wall. A little to the left, I said. Daniel held the frame steady while the facilities guy marked the wall with a pencil. 9 certificates, reprinted from PDFs I'd requested from 9 different universities and language institutes, some of which had taken 2 months to dig out of their own archives. German, Mandarin, Portuguese, Arabic, Japanese, Russian, Italian,
Dutch, French.
4 years ago, I had burned the originals in a metal wastebasket on my apartment balcony, one at a time, watching each one curl before I fed it the next. I remembered thinking at the time that the smoke smelled like nothing, like relief has no odor. You could have picked a nicer wall, Daniel said. This one gets afternoon sun. They'll fade. Let them fade, I said. I have the files. He grinned and went back to holding the frame. Peyton stopped by my new office that same week with 2 coffees and a folder she didn't open right away. My title was on the door now, Director of International Operations, in the same gray lettering as Julian's, 1 floor down from his, but with a window that faced the river instead of the parking structure. The 65% raise had landed in my account on a Friday. I'd checked the balance twice, the way you check a bruise to see if it still hurts, and both times it just sat there, a number true. Vantage cut ties with Spencer's old firm inside of a week, Peyton said, setting 1 coffee on my desk. Word is nobody in Frankfurt will take his calls. Eric told me the partners voted unanimously to sever the relationship before the arraignment even happened. And the charges? Wire fraud, corporate espionage, falsifying business records. Federal, not state. He's out on bond, but he can't leave the country. She sipped her coffee. Sophia's cooperating fully. Prosecutors are treating her as a witness, not a co-conspirator, since she came forward before they subpoenaed her. I nodded. I'd read the same summary in an email from legal that morning, but hearing Peyton say it in a normal voice over coffee in daylight made it feel less like a thing that had happened to me and more like a thing that had simply happened, the way weather happens. You're leading the closing on Iberia next month, Peyton said. Eric specifically asked for you. Not a translator. You. I know. Julian wants to announce it at the next town hall. Says you should say a few words. In whatever language you want. I thought about that for a second. A room full of people who'd watched me get called a liar on a stage, now waiting to hear me speak on purpose. It didn't scare me the way it would have 3 weeks ago. English, I said. I think English is exactly right for that one. Peyton smiled like she'd expected that answer and left the folder on my desk anyway unopened. Read it when you're ready, she said. It's not urgent. It's just good news for once. After she left, I opened it. Inside was a signed engagement letter, Summit's first standalone contract in Frankfurt, negotiated in German, closed by me, worth $11 million in advisory fees over 3 years. Eric's signature was on the last page, along with a handwritten line at the bottom. Willkommen, Frau Vetter.
Es freut mich, dass Sie sich entschieden haben, Ihre eigene Sprache zu sprechen.
Welcome, Ms. Vetter. I'm glad you decided to speak your own language. I read it twice, then set it on the desk next to the window, where the afternoon light would hit it the same way it hit the 9 certificates on the wall behind me. For 4 years, I had told myself that silence was armor. That if I never let anyone see the whole of what I could do, no one could ever again stand close enough to strip it from me and walk away wearing it like a coat. I understand now that I had that backwards. The silence never protected me. It protected the version of me that was safe for someone else to use, safe to underpay, safe to overlook, safe to discard, because a woman who hides her value teaches the room exactly how little to offer her. I don't hide anymore. Not the languages, not the degree, not the 4 years I spent pretending English was the only thing I had. If you've ever gone quiet to keep yourself safe, Ask what that silence has actually been protecting, you or someone who is counting on it.